Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm Isis Phoenix, and I'm a sexual somatic body worker and the founder of Naked Yoga Alliance, a resource network for the practice of naked yoga. And I am currently in a year-long training studying pelvic heart integration to become a practitioner of that. And I am absolutely thrilled to be speaking with Dr. Deborah Taj Anapol about that. And she is the center holder and the lineage holder of this amazing system of whole body healing. And she's also a published author with many books on polyamory, as well as the 7 natural laws of love. And welcome, Deborah.
Thank you, Isis. Really happy to be here today.
So, we're going to be talking a little bit about pelvic heart integration. We are doing an event this summer, July 10th through 12th in upstate New York. And we're doing an interview for Sentient Magazine today. Sentient Magazine is a conversation about women's sexuality. And the conversation we're going to be talking about are masculine and feminine energies. What are they? How do we embody them? And particularly, how do they link to this pelvic heart integration system that you are the lineage holder for? So, Deborah, I'm going to ask you, let's just start with what is masculine and what is feminine?
Hmm. Let me say, first of all, that I'm really wanting to move away from the terms masculine and feminine and prefer just to talk about men and women, or if we're talking about the psychological or the internal structures, the inner man and the inner woman, but it's a bit awkward. So you may hear me using the words masculine and feminine, but to really try to be aware that these are social definitions.
Hmm.
They're things that have been made up. They change over time. They change from culture to culture. And growing up in our culture, we tend to believe in whatever we're told is the feminine, that is what's characteristic of women, and what's masculine, what's characteristic of men. But we need to remember that these are made up definitions. Now, our gender, which applies to our physical bodies, is one of our primary identities. One of the first things we learn as little children is, I'm a girl, I'm a boy. And then we learn what our culture thinks is appropriate behavior for girls and boys. And that's really what masculine and feminine are. It's what the culture has decided is appropriate qualities, behaviors, attitudes for girls and boys.
Hmm. I heard you mention the inner man and the inner woman. Can you talk a little bit more about how that's different from masculine and feminine, and also what the benefits of cultivating a relationship with both are?
Okay. The reality is that because we are all the products of sexual reproduction,
Mm.
a man and a woman came together and the sperm fertilized the egg and we're the result. So right there, we biologically came from both a man and a woman. And then as we grow up, as we become initiated or indoctrinated into the culture, we internalize this idea of masculine and feminine based on our parents' behaviors. So what we take to be feminine has a lot to do with the particular mom that, or mother surrogate, doesn't have to be biological, but the particular woman or women that were important growing up, and what we take to be our inner man or the masculine is modeled on the important men, whether that's father or father surrogate or whoever is in the field. Now, there's a great advantage actually for children that are raised in more of a tribal or extended family situation because there's more than one role model for feminine and masculine. And the the problem that we've had until recently in our culture is that there was a belief for a while that women should only have feminine traits and men should only have masculine traits. And the reality is that we all have both. And one way to talk about this is to say we all have inside of us an inner woman and an inner man. And the one that is the same as the gender that we identify with is the one that the culture has encouraged us to express. And if we want to be, let's say, a good girl, then we have to limit our expression of the more masculine or boyish or inner man, however you want to put it. We have to limit that expression in order to conform to the cultural expectations. And this is where we start getting into trouble because we're essentially being told that half of us or some portion of us is not okay and can't be expressed, can't be shown to others, can't be made conscious to ourselves. It all has to somehow disappear.
So I heard you say half of us. Does that mean that we've got a 50-50 split? Like I have an inner 50 or 100% man, 100% woman, and they make up, 200% or a 50-50? Like, is it that cut and dry what we're looking for?
It's not. And I think this is one of the places that pelvic heart integration really differs from a lot of the information that's out there, which does give the impression that if we want to be balanced individuals, we should be 50-50, half and half. And each individual is unique. So each individual has their own unique blend, not only of male and female or masculine and feminine, but what I like to call yin and yang, or active and receptive energies. And one person may be, if we try to keep it simple for a minute and stick with the male and female, one person might be 60-40, another might be 70-30, another might be 50-50. It's very unusual for a person to be completely feminine or completely masculine with no what we think of as cross-gender traits. Such a person, although it's been held up to be the cultural ideal, is really quite handicapped because we've made the what I'll call yin and yang, or the active and receptive, which is another dimension entirely that can show up in both a feminine expression and a masculine expression. But in our culture, we want to say that the feminine is yin and the masculine is yang. And you'll hear a lot of people say this or use the terms interchangeably, but they're not. And if you think about it for a moment, you'll see, if we start with the feminine, that the yin feminine, that is the receptive feminine, is the supportive, nurturing, loving, what we think of as the ideal mother But the reality is that an effective mother has to be a leader to her children. She has to be able to set boundaries. She has to be able to take charge. She has to be able to play the teacher role, which is, it's a young, active role.
Hmm.
A woman who only has access to her yin qualities is actually not going to be effective as a mother.
Hmm. Hmm.
And similarly for men, we want to say that the ideal is the active or the young masculine, the one who is the leader and the warrior. And that is one side of the masculine. But the father is a more nurturing role. The husband is a more nurturing role. The lover is a more nurturing role. And if we eliminate the nurturing and supportive aspects from the masculine, we have a man who's not very relatable.
So I will admit something personally. When I was hearing a lot of the work in pelvic heart around harmonizing the inner masculine and feminine, I got a little nervous because it felt like it was taking me back to my college days as an angry feminist, where I felt like I had kind of, muscled up and over yanged myself as this sort of, just like backlash against the patriarchy. And it was very much along the lines of the second wave feminism movement of Betty Friedan and Germaine Greer that, had kind of, taken women out of the home because we weren't satisfied there, and we'd moved into the workforce, and we're, anything a man could do, we could do better, Annie, get your gun mentality. And I also found that, I wasn't really enjoying my sex life at that time either. I felt like I needed to be in control of everything and almost needed to be dominating over men. And I got really worried that I would return to that part of myself in the pelvic heart work. But I found that that wasn't true. I just found a greater harmony in that space. So I wonder, as we're kind of in this, now approaching the third wave of feminism, what your kind of vision for this harmonized inner man, inner woman, yin feminine, yang feminine might be in this third wave.
Great question. And you've used the word harmony, which is a word that we like in pelvic heart integration more than balance, because harmony, like integration, suggests a blend of different elements that is pleasing and that is productive. So in pelvic heart integration, we're interested in a cooperative, supportive relationship between the masculine and the feminine, whether that's the masculine and the feminine inside us, or whether that's with someone outside. And it's the old alchemical formula, as within, so without. And so the teaching is that if we harmonize the masculine and the feminine inside, then we can have harmony with the masculine and feminine outside. And I think the problem with the second wave feminism, as you've discussed, and perhaps a necessary phase to reject this old restrictive cultural stereotype that says that girls cannot do things that boys do, and boys cannot do things that girls do, and that anything masculine is better than something feminine. That kind of needed to get demolished a bit. But if we stop with the feminine being angry at or fighting with the masculine, we're not in a very good place. Because this fight's going on inside as well as outside. And so the direction that I see is that we have a sense of wholeness and harmony and peace and completeness inside, because the masculine and the feminine, the active and receptive, are working together for the greater good. And then that whole person is then free to play, interact, create, work, enjoy another whole person on the outside. And this is, I think, where we're headed. But it's been a bit of a difficult road to take because we don't have a lot of models for how to do this. Most of the models we have are either the masculine dominating the feminine, or the masculine and the feminine fighting with each other to see who's on top, who's in control. And yeah, this is not peaceful. This is not sexy. But there's another piece here that I want to bring in, which is that in our culture, when a woman expresses her yang side, she's often called masculine. But to me, the energy of the yang feminine is not masculine at all. It's actually what you could say is the shadow side or the dark side of the woman, what's been culturally repressed. That's her sexuality. So the yang feminine is very sexy. All the sex goddesses from antiquity are an expression of the yang feminine. And she loves the masculine, and she loves to play with him in a sexual way. So there's nothing hostile or aggressive there. But these same sex goddesses, this yang feminine, they were often warrior goddesses as well. Now, we're not going to make love and make war in the same moment, in the same breath. But these are both very active and powerful expressions.
So what are some ways, let's say I'm feeling very yang, and I want to cultivate more yin, or likewise I'm feeling very yin and want to cultivate more yang. What are some of the techniques that the pelvic heart integration system teaches that I might benefit from?
Well, the breath cycle is the core teaching in pelvic heart integration. And it's a 4-part breath cycle. And it starts with what we call the safe, secure breath. And this particular, as it sounds like, this particular phase of the breath cycle is the phase that is often ignored or left out in a masculinized culture that doesn't actually honor the yin, whether it's in the man or the woman, that doesn't want to take the time to rest, to be still, to be quiet, to slow down and savor the sensation of being in the body and just noticing the breath going in and out, noticing the subtleties and the really potentially ecstatic experience of doing nothing or not doing anything, but being. So this is the piece that both men and women actually, but anyone who wants to cultivate their yin can take the time to slow down and relax and feel, and to not always be having to be active, not always having to produce. Creation, we know this from the life cycle, What's the first thing that happens when a seed grows? It's buried in the earth. It doesn't look like much is going on, but it's in darkness and it's germinating. And so taking the time for this, and then in the breath cycle, once we're germinating, once we're embodied, then we begin to build up some charge in the body through the breath and through movement and through awareness of the source of energy, the earth. So we learn to draw energy up from the earth, and we learn to create and contain some charge in the body without immediately rushing to give it away or discharge it or do anything with it, but allowing it to build. And so these first two parts of the breath cycle really emphasize the feminine, the yin feminine.
Beautiful. So, as the center holder and lineage holder for pelvic heart integration, I've imagined that you've had some pretty powerful and transformative experiences exploring the breath cycle over, the years that you've been doing this. What have you noticed in your own transformation and your own evolution as a sexual being on the planet? And how has that supported you in coming into your wholeness and inner harmony as a woman?
Yes, the breath cycle has been an incredible teacher for me. And it's really something that we teach and we learn only because we've become disconnected from our natural state. And we're all born with the capacity to be fully embodied and to enjoy the sensual delight of being in the body, and to be able to both receive feminine and masculine energy into our bodies and to share energy with other beings. But if this natural energy flow gets cut off, as it does for so many of us because we're raised by parents who are probably very well-meaning, but who were themselves raised by parents who were cut off from the natural energy flow. And after a few generations, no one remembers. And so the breath cycle helps us to get connected again, both with the earth and with the cosmos, and to feel the meeting of these two powerful currents in our own bodies and connecting with another. For me, one of the most powerful things that occurred in the practice of the breath cycle was, first of all, to realize that just by breathing, every cell in my body could become completely orgasmic. Nothing more was needed. And that's quite a revelation. Usually we think we have to do a lot of things or put some chemicals into our body or somehow change our natural state in order to have an ecstatic experience. And it's actually just the opposite of that. Our natural state is an ecstatic experience, which has been covered over by body armor and mental activity and popping out of the body so that we're not feeling what's going on there, distracting ourselves, trying to somehow fill up the emptiness inside. And So the breath really, this practice really allows returning to the natural state. And in that returning to the natural state, an amazing discovery happened for me, which is that when I was charging myself with energy, or taking in, I discovered that I could take in not only the love or the feminine support that I wanted or needed, but also the masculine strength and presence that I wanted and needed. That they were both available to breathe in from the earth with the breath.
Beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. So once, I think there's a concern. There was certainly a concern in the 70s that, well, if women get too independent, they won't want or need men. And again, it's kind of just the opposite. It's like once I was really able to take in what I needed and to be whole and complete in myself, it was only then that I could show up for connection with men in a place of not being needy, not being dependent, not being desperate, but to enjoy, to give, to share. And this is what harmony between the genders looks like, I believe.
Beautiful. I love that vision. And it sounds more generous. It sounds like a very full, generous space.
Yes, yes. If we can get out of this mindset of what I need and shift that to what I have to share, then it's a much more generous feeling and it's a much more enjoyable experience.
I love that. Okay, well, this has been our interview for Sentient Magazine, a conversation on women's sexuality and sexual health. And we've been speaking with Dr. Deborah Taj Anapol, and we're putting together a level 1 activation for pelvic heart integration in upstate New York, July 10th through the 12th. And we would love to share this with you. And you can register online at pelvicheart.com, and there'll be more information there.
Thank you, Isis.
Thank you, Deborah.